Hello guys and welcome to my tutorial. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to take pictures from NASA's Earth polychromatic imaging camera and then display them in a video month to month. In hindsight, it would have been cooler to do what NASA did and have it do it by hour based, because this is what that looks like. But basically, this camera takes pictures of Earth between 6 to 12 times a day and sends them back, and NASA has a free API that you can tap into to get the images. I'll go ahead and I'll show you the result that I got. Alright, so goes through this. This is the start of the application. NASA only allows 50 requests per IP address per day and 30 requests per hour per IP per day. Or I guess per hour. So now I'm going to go ahead and enter a year. So let's do 2017. And now it's going to get that from NASA. Alright, so it's saving all those images from different dates, and then it used FFmpeg to combine all the images into a single video file. So now let's go ahead and take a look and see what that looks like. Here's the output. You have to open it with a VLC because Windows does not have the included libraries to play it. So I wouldn't say that it's as cool as NASA's, however, I still think it's pretty interesting being able to see the entire Earth and where a specific satellite was on the same day, month after month. But very cool. Anyways, let's get into the programming. Okay, so before we can get to the actual code, we need to install a few libraries. We're going to need to install request and urllib3. Request will be handling the API requests, and so will urllib. Urllib will be actually parsing the address. So just go ahead and install that. And now we can get to the actual code of it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open my project folder, which you can see I'm in, Python tutorial 3, and I'm going to create a new file called main.py, and I'm going to save it, make sure it's there, and then I'm going to create another folder in here called images. And this is going to store all the images that it actually downloads. And I'm also going to, I'll go ahead and I'll save that for last. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is import requests. And we need to import URL retrieve. And we also need to just do that here. We'll import OS. Okay. So before we can begin, the first thing you're going to need is an API key. So what you're going to do is in your browser, going to go to api.nasa.gov and then enter your first name. So enter name, and I'm also going to change which VPN I'm on so that they can't track my IP. So this way I can use the API even though I've already used it a lot. Alright, this is your API key. So now what you're going to want to do is go back to your file and put the API key in. And this is kind of like a password or an access token in order to use the API. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on actually fetching the images. So I'm going to go ahead and define a method. It's going to be called fetch epic image. And it's going to take some parameters. I'm just going to say T for time, I for image, and X for interval. Okay, so image underscore ID is going to equal I, and we're going to go ahead and use this to convert it to a string. And then NASA's a little bit tricky because the way that they have their date set up is on the actual fetching the data part, you need to use dashes. However, for getting the image, you need to use slashes. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this with this. And you'll see what that does in the future. So now we need to actually give the base URL for Epic. This is actually pretty hard to figure out because there isn't a lot of documentation on this. So I'm just going to go over to my other file and paste that in. So you're going to use this URL. And then underscore epic equals URL underscore epic plus T, and this is going to set the time. Whoops. Plus T. URL underscore epic equals URL. And the data type that we're going to be getting is a .png. So do /png. URL epic equals epic plus slash, and then we'll add the image ID and .png. So this is basically just going to form the actual request. So when you do a API request, there's some parameters that it takes that you need to kind of understand. So let me see if I can explain this better. Okay, so you have your API key here. If you go here and you take this, you can take this and then put in a date, the image type, and then the image name. The thing that you need to get from the actual data is the image name. So you can see if I click here, the image actually pops up. So that's the next thing that we're going to be getting is the image name to add to the dataset. Okay. So, now that we have this created, let's go ahead and do URL retrieve, and we're going to take URL epic and the image ID plus .png, and this is going to put in the URL with the date added, and then it's going to add the image ID and then add .png to the end, and this will cause it to navigate to the correct page. And then there's one more thing that we need to do. We need to do os.system, and we're just going to do some Windows commands here. We're going to move the image, and this is just moving the image itself that we actually download, because it downloads to the root folder of the same folder that the Python folder is in usually. So what you need to do is actually move it. So I'm going to do this plus .png plus images slash plus x dot png. And what this should do is it should move the image ID, and then it'll add .png to the end so it gets the file name, and then it will move that to images slash x, which is the interval, so it's going to be the month that it's currently on. So like January would be 1, February would be 2, right? That's how months work, I think. And then add .png at the end. So the next thing that we need to do is actually get the image names. So we're going to define fetch epic data, and this is going to take two parameters, time and x, which is the interval that we have up here. And what this is going to do is first, it's going to actually use a different URL. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this from my notes. So URL epic equals, you get this API natural slash date, and then plus t. And plus t is going to be the actual time or the actual date frame. So like 01/01/2020 would be like an example of what t could be. And then we're going to have to add some parameters. underscore key equal API underscore key. And that is it for the parameters. So now we need to do response equals requests dot get URL epic, and then the params are going to be the params. Whoops. Params equal the params, and then we're going to convert this to JSON from an object. And sometimes what can happen is you go to a date time that doesn't actually have any data because you're looking in a period where they didn't take any pictures. So that can cause there to be out of, I think it's called oh, it's an index error because you're trying to get an index that doesn't exist because it's an empty object. So what I did to kind of fix this and make it so it actually works is I just have a try and exception statement. So I have image equals response, and what this actually returns is if you were to go to this URL, add the date and then your API key onto the end, like this, and then you would just enter the key here, and then you would see a bunch of JSON. So the list gets converted to JSON, and then you take a index of the list, and that's one picture that was taken that day. So I like to choose 1, because usually that index is okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and convert the image to a dictionary, and this is so we can pull out a key. So now that image is a dictionary of one entry out of the list, what we can actually do is get the image. This is the key, and the value will be the actual image name. So what I like to do is actually just print the image name. So there we go. And now it is time to, let's see, it's time to call fetch epic image. And this is going to take the time frame, the image, and x. And this is all going to be sent from this function to this function. Now let's do an exception here. And we're just going to pass. It's basically the same as continue in other languages. So now we're going to go ahead and make the user interface. So first thing we need to do is kind of say what this application is. So let's say this application is used to create a video of Earth from one picture taken every month. I'll go ahead and add the developer name. really like to do that sometimes. Okay. So, the first thing that we're gonna do is create some variables. So we're gonna say age, and this is gonna equal the year. So we're just gonna say it's a string. Month equals that. Then just input. That's gonna be used for our user input. So now let's do a while loop. While true, print, and we'll give some I don't really think we need to give any more instructions. Let's go ahead and just say enter a year. And we probably need codes for that. Now let's say age equals input. And now we need to create our loop to go through and get all the images. So we'll say I equals range 0 to 12. And since it starts at 0 and goes to 11, or it starts at 0 and goes to 12, that would equal 13. And I know there's only 12 months in a year, however, when you're starting at 0, it doesn't actually get to the last number, so you need to go one up, because if this worked the way that it seems like it would work, you would put 11, but it's actually 12. It's kind of like list indexes. So now you do x equals 1, and this is the interval. So for count in I, index equals x. Oops. Oh, that's weird. X equals string. And now we're just kind of setting up the date. So something about this is we can't just use x because it's an integer, and it needs to have a 0 in front of it if it's under a certain number, because that's how dates work. However, if it's like 10, then we can't have a 0 in front of there. So what I'm going to do is do if the length of x is greater than 2, if the is greater than 2, x equals 0 plus x. So this will just add a 0 in front of it. And then from there, we'll just go ahead and print x. So now we're going to say date equals age plus one of these plus x plus one of those again. And then we're going to put a day in here. I just like to put in the 15th, but you can put in anything that you want. This is the actual day that it's going to take the picture from each month. So it goes year, dash, month, dash, and then day. Okay. So now let's go ahead and print the date. And then do fetch epic image data. And we're going to put in date and x. And then we're going to say x equals index plus 1. And then we're going to want to break break this. And then we'll do os.system. And what we're going to need to do is actually go into the image file, and then we're going to use FFmpeg, which is something I'm going to show you in a minute, to actually convert it to a video. So what you're going to do is just go ahead and copy this command. So basically what this does is it uses os.system, which just is the same as you like typing in this terminal. However, it only works in the current directory that it's in. So what you have to do is actually cd into the folder, because this is where our ffmpeg executable is. So it cds, and then after that it does this, and this is what actually converts everything. And I'm going to talk about this because this took a little bit for me to figure out. Basically what this is, so you put a percent, and then, so this is like for the numbering system, and then a 0, and then 2, because it's a 2-character name, and then you put in D for data, I guess, and then .png at the end, obviously. And then the output file is going to be called output.mp4. And then something that I kind of like to do after is just print cleaning up, because those images are a little bit big. They're like 3 megabytes. So cleaning up, os.system, and go ahead and just copy this again. It's not Python, so I don't really want to explain or type it out, I guess. So cd images, and then it deletes, without confirming with you, all the PNG files in the actual folder. That's what this does. Okay, I think we're ready to test it. Got my API key, VPN is ready to go. Saved it, got my images folder. Oh yeah, there's one more thing. We need to get the ffmpeg in there. So, what you're gonna do is first we need to go to ffmpeg.org, and we need to download the Windows build. So I guess we'll just say download build. And this would download. I'll just go ahead and cut this, put it over here. Python project 3, and we'll paste it in here, and we'll extract it. And then we're going to want to go to the bin file and grab the ffmpeg.exe, and we're going to want to cut that and go to images and just paste it in there. Alright, now that we're in here, I'm just going to type in cmd and start one up, and type in python main.py. It looks like we have a error. Let's take a look at that. Alright, so it says no module named URL lib.requests on line 2. Oh, whoops, it's URL lib.request. There we go. Alright, let's try this again. see if we got everything good. Alright, cool. Let's go ahead and enter 2018. What the heck? Oh. Oh. I see what happened. Okay. So, in the script here, I added an extra 0 accidentally. So, now let's try that again. (2017). Okay, it's downloading it. And it's moving the files over. You can actually watch it populate. So we can see those here. And then it's gonna, once it gets to 12, when it gets to 12,
Alright. That's weird. Alright, let's look at the output. Alright, I need to use VLC. Nice. But yeah, that's a wrap for this tutorial.